Welcome to Adrian's Corner. I am Adrian.
And I'm Mr. K.
And this is definitely my corner. Resident Evil 3, a remake of the 1999 PlayStation game, planned as a spin-off featuring a new antagonist at the helm. The original Resident Evil 3, Nemesis, had a major marketing campaign at its back, which helped create a commercial success for RE3, selling over 3 million copies worldwide. Now fast forward to the recent past. Last year, Resident Evil 2 came out to widespread critical acclaim, praising it for its presentation, gameplay, and faithfulness to the original. It was nominated for numerous awards, including the Game of the Year, and sold over 5.8 million copies, outselling its original release. So how does this latest remake in the Resident Evil franchise hold up with a brand new, shiny release of Resident Evil 3? Well, all of that is coming up, starting now. Okay, so a remake of Resident Evil 3, a chance to follow up on the very successful release of Resident Evil 2 last year. So how did it do? Well, let's start with the good. The Nemesis, keeping true to its origins, it brings weapons to the game's primary antagonist along with additional attacks and abilities that make it far more dangerous in a fight than Mr. X ever was from Resident Evil 2. Additionally, the Nemesis, unlike Mr. X, also offers you an incentive to engage him early on. Little Easter egg here, but if you knock him down at least once, you get a handy weapon upgrade. Now aside from this, his character is also faster than Mr. X, which makes straight running away from him not something you can do without using your dodge. This makes him much more dangerous than Mr. X as well. Now, however, because Capcom chose to feature him constantly in cutscenes, along with a strange spoon-feeding of the purpose of the Nemesis before you even take control of the primary protagonist, Jill Valentine, for the first time, it's missing the terror of facing the unknown that you get when facing Mr. X. It's much more action-tense-oriented than fear and horror.
Exactly. This Nemesis wasn't scary at all. After the opening cutscene, it was more like, "Oh, hi, how are you? I see you're chasing me again. Cool, let's go for a walk, shall we?"
Now, after the game initially stumbles in its opening sequence, it does finally open up street side and gives us a refreshing view of the city, bringing that Halloween, candy-like, spooky street side atmosphere. Now, early game, the Resident Evil remake keeps its core scare feeling. However, despite its more diverse scenery, the claustrophobic elements of RE2 are missing from large portions of this game. Now, this in of itself isn't necessarily a bad thing for those wanting a little more action-adventure, but it does peel back some of the scare layers, especially early on. And then the difficulty balance, it's also quite reasonable, and as long as you make use of the world mechanics like destroying barrels, electrifying charges to help stun zombies, etc., you'll find that even on the higher difficulty settings, you really shouldn't struggle too much. You just gotta watch for your healing items, because in later parts of the game when you face bosses, if you're short on that can make the experience much more difficult than it needs to be, especially on the higher difficulty settings. And then, finding secrets retains its fun factor in Resident Evil 3 that we felt in Resident Evil 2. It's nothing too complicated, which on one hand makes it easier to clear sections entirely, and while on the other, takes a little bit away of the hunting and the detective work you had to do in RE2, which depending on your take of the game and what you prefer, it can be a pro or a negative. But overall, not bad at all.
I really did enjoy the Umbrella Corporation's part of the story, the most until I realized it was so goddamn short. They even talked about the evil things they were doing in the labs, and that would have made it so much better if you could have checked the locations and seen the horrors that they were talking about.
Exactly. They could have done so much more once you get back inside the nest. Now, I know in the last game we got to explore more and maybe they didn't want to rehash it, but they could have added a little bit more meat to that part of the game. And it's just a miss. It really was. Now, let's talk about the two protagonists you get to play in RE3, Jill Valentine and Carlos Oliveira. Now, it was a refreshing change of pace to be able to play them both on one playthrough rather than having to play each one separately. I was one of those who didn't like having to start all over and play through all the same sections I'd just gone on in the case of Resident Evil 2 with Claire and Leon. Now, don't get me wrong, I didn't mind the two campaigns being separate. It's just I didn't want to go through the same zones over and over again and see the same areas, but somehow I never meet the other character from the other side of the campaign. I found that a little annoying. Now, RE3's mixed campaign definitely helped with the flow of the story and help it stay together, which, as I mentioned, is a welcome change. Now, overall flow of the story works well here. However, it does suffer from an odd, overextending the ending-itis, and by that I mean that the game felt that it should have come to a close long before you actually see the credits roll.
And I agree and disagree. I felt that the jumping between them was a big waste of time, to say the least. I personally felt that it slowed the game's pace down by quite a bit due to the fact that, for me, it broke my immersion with the game because of the switches. It broke my investment with Jill due to the lack of the continuing story arc of both characters. There was just not enough character there.
So this seems like an opportune moment to shift gears now, and let's focus on what was wrong with Resident Evil 3. First things first, the introduction to this game really starts you off on the wrong foot. The tense feeling of dread is immediately dispelled literal moments after the game begins. Right off the gate, we have a cutscene after cutscene after cutscene after cutscene after cutscene after cutscene, and you're never really allowed to get into the moment, which makes this opening chase scenes in part of the introduction seem very dry. It's not scary at all or tense whatsoever. Now, as Jill says to her friend,
I'm sorry, Brad.
as a player, so am I sorry for this. The story side to this game suffers heavily from too much exposition via cutscenes in the beginning, which is such a shame too, because once you are actually given the controls and let loose, the game picks up very quickly. And this, by the way, goes back to something I said in our previous video, Black Mesa for Better or Worse 22 years later. The Crowbar Collective should have taken a step back at some point and asked themselves the critical question, is this fun? Is this what our audience is looking for in a Half-Life remake? And that definitely applies here. Whether it was because so much money was invested in animating that the devs just didn't want to cut it, or perhaps they just failed to ask themselves the crucial question, whether it was fun, or is this what their audience wanted? In either case, it made for a very clunky beginning. Now, this does get less intrusive throughout much of the middle of the game, but they start getting back to this heavy cutscene exposition as you get closer and closer to the end.
Now, Carlos's character is worthless to me. The game would have been fine without him in it from the start to finish, mainly because you didn't get to use him hardly at all. I wanted more of what we got. Jill Valentine, for what it was worth, was a decent story, but I felt it was put on hold because f***ing chase scene ruined the pacing of the game.
If there's one thing I can agree with you on here, it's Carlos did not get enough attention, so when you do see him, you really don't get enough meat. It worked with keeping the flow together, but you don't get enough backstory of Carlos and why do you care. And then another small issue with the game, and that is the death camps. They really didn't vary much. They were pretty gruesome, which was kind of cool, and that kept in line with the feeling of both RE2 and RE3, but the lack of variety got pretty wearisome before long.
And on that note, the f***ing cutscene forcibly stopped your gameplay to have one after another cutscene was just so dumb. There was a total of 81 f***ing cutscenes that I counted in this game. 81! What the f***?
And there was another minor issue here, which was the autosaves in badly timed areas, which can cause you to immediately start taking damage upon loading in. Now, this didn't happen too often, but it was early enough in the game to where it felt noticeable and unfair. Now, a lot of the scares Capcom introduces into the game feel bland, due in large part, as you mentioned, Mr. K, about using too many cutscenes to introduce the monsters. This is the exact opposite approach that they used in Resident Evil 2. They do get the gross out factor right in this game, but the sense of dread and fear of what's around the next corner is strikingly missing for a lot of this game.
And the boss battles. I truly f***ing hated the Nemesis. He was by far the worst part of this DLC shit show. I had no fear of this guy throughout the game. I felt he got in the way of the story more than helping move along, by having you kill it over and over and over and fucking over again. With some difference in game mechanics, didn't make it fun, but meant, oh God, alright, let's do this again. This game abandoned the horror aspect that Resident Evil is and was known for.
Yeah, and the chase scenes, they weren't bad necessarily, there wasn't the sense of dread. It was more like, oh, here we go again, and I'm just gonna run. It lacked the sense of dread from Mr. X. Mr. X really made you feel like, oh, he's right around the corner, and I gotta get the out of here. Now, let's shift over then to the suspension of disbelief issues. How about the safe room? Right out the gate from the train station. The door doesn't even close. How the fuck is this supposed to keep zombies from just creeping in to the train station? This seemed like a very odd and weird design choice and left me just scratching my head. Oh, and here comes the nemesis. How on earth does this make any sense? He literally was smashing through brick walls to get to me not long ago. How does this little flimsy door stop him? Capcom's dev team really dropped the ball when making choices like this. It just comes across as stupid and odd.
Now I do have one more thing I want to add on there, and that is there was a scene that he shoots a rocket launcher at Jill, and it explodes within like a foot of her, but somehow she's perfectly alright. And she gets up and starts walking, and when that happened, it's pulled me out of the game, and I was like, wait, what did I just watch? That did not just seriously happen.
Oh my god, I had completely forgotten about that till you mentioned it. It was a what the f moment. I mean, how do you get hit with a missile? Oh, hey, I'm not even wearing body armor, but dude, I'm cool. Now, speaking of design choices, I know for the purpose of the game saving, they chose to have a safe room on top of a burning building. But seriously, what the f? At least they could have just left it with only an autosave here. It would have made so much more sense. Now, I know they wanted to give you the chance to shift your gear around, blah, 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 but seriously, just stop it. That was dumb. It's another example of breaking with the realism of the game, and head-scratching at best. And now for my biggest complaint for this game. The theft of decision-making and actual control of the game whenever something important happens. So, spoiler alert. Rather than let the player be in control for most of the final moments of this game, it plays out like a movie where you, the gamer, aren't even involved. They barely even let you pull the trigger in the end in an emotionless final scene. The ending of the game felt very underwhelming because of this, and when the credits finally came to a close and I powered this game down, I was glad it was over, and I didn't see myself wanting to open it back up again after this video was made. This is a pretty strong departure for me compared to its predecessor, Resident Evil 2, where I did play through the game a second time just to satisfy the itch of finding every nook and cranny of the game in regards to secrets and story. This time around in Raccoon City, I was happy to say goodbye to the game for good.
So there's one more thing about the theft of decision. In an IGN article, it stated that this game was originally had two endings for the original RE3. You had multiple choices throughout the game which defined your gameplay, whether you had this ending or another ending. But in this game, they took away all the choices, and I feel like that really dragged away from what made the game really good. Also, why the f is this game $60? It was about 5 to 7 hours long. At least in RE2, you got 2 stories to play, but goddamn, this game was way too short. Now look, I understand the original was rushed because of the promise of RE4 going to the PS2, which left the game with so little time to finish that they canceled the original RE3, and made a spin-off prototype that became the third mainline game in the series for the original PlayStation. And lastly, look, if you really love RE2, you might just like this game. But for $60 DLC of the game, I just can't recommend it until it goes down.
Now, to be fair though, you kind of got Capcom in a rock and a hard place. They don't want to add additional story or deviate from the original. That was one of the things they got praised so much for in RE2, was keeping the story the same.
But they removed so much from this game. They removed a lot from this game.
Right, and that's where they could have, if they wanted additional content, they could have used, as you said, from the rushed Resident Evil 3 Nemesis game, they could have added more of that. So it kind of goes both ways here. I just want to be fair. So final thoughts on this game. And as Mr. K said, for the price, it seemed a little light on content from my taste. There is, however, plenty of decent game to play here and some interesting stories. But it does suffer heavily from cutscene-itis that stole all the potential best scenes and moments and monster reveals and replaced them with bland moments of you just sitting back and watching from a static viewpoint. All in all, it's a decent game. Just a little underwhelming, especially considering the great job they had done with Resident Evil 2. Let us know what you think in the comments section, and feel free to subscribe if you enjoy our videos. From From Adrian's Corner, I'm Adrian,
And I'm Mr. K.
and we'll see you next time.